Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline from KnittingHouseSquare and today I have an extension of a previous knitting tutorial for you. So a few years back I put out my socks knit flat video, and this is the cute little pink sock that I knit in that tutorial. And that video was very popular, which made me very happy. But one feedback I received was that people actually wanted to be able to make a right and a left sock. So what I mean by that is in that video tutorial, I just created one sock pattern. So essentially you knit the same sock twice, and as you're knitting these socks, both of the seams end up on the left side. So the feedback I received was that people actually want a right and a left sock. So now what I've done is in this video extension that you're currently watching, I show the modification that you need to make the left sock. So essentially now the seam of this sock is on the inside, so the seam faces over towards the right, and now you could wear a set where the seams are both going to be on the insides. Now, really the only modification you actually need to make from the original pattern is how you place the heel. So the way this works is essentially you knit the original pattern all the way up until where the heel goes. So that original video all the way up until like 15.5 minutes. Then you hop over here to watch the heel of the opposite sock. Then you can jump back over to the original pattern again, and the foot and the toe are exactly the same. So I hope you enjoy this little extension. I also have the written version of how you do this other sock linked down below. And if you have any comments, of course, leave them down below. Let's get started. So I'm going to refer to the sock from the original video as kind of like the right sock. So in this one, the seam is on the left inside of the right sock. And now what I'm going to be showing you in this video is how to modify that original pattern to create a left sock where now the seam is on the inside right of that foot. So now you could wear them as a little pair. So the way this is going to work is essentially the only thing that's different between the right and the left sock here is how the heel is worked. So let me draw you a quick picture real quick of what I'm talking about. Okay, so since it's knit flat, I just kind of drew each sock as a rectangle, and we can think about the bottom of this piece of paper as the ribbing for each one of the socks, and we're knitting from the ribbing of that cuff all the way up to where the toe would be. So in the original video, what we had done is you work basically like the cuff, the sock leg, and then you insert the heel. And when you insert that heel, we were working across the first half of the stitches, right? So we decreased and then we increased again to create the other side of the heel, and it ends up on the right side of your work. What we're gonna do in this video is we basically start off with the same exact template. So we start at the cuff, we knit through the leg, the exact same length and everything like that. So I have a little sock leg already made. We're just gonna place the heel on the opposite side. So we're gonna knit across the first half of our stitches, and then we're going to place in this heel. So where you should start if you're interested in making this left sock is you actually want to start working that full tutorial, the original video, all the way up until the heel portion. So the heel portion starts at about 15.5 minutes through. So that is where I'm going to pick up in this video to show you how to work the heel for this left sock now. I am also going to be working the exact same size I knit in the other video. So this one is the largest size available, or the one with the 74 stitches cast on. So first up, what I want to do is I want to knit all the way across, leaving just one stitch over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to end up knitting 73 of my 74 stitches. Okay, so I have one stitch left over here on the left. And before I work that, I'm actually just gonna leave it as it is. I'm gonna turn my work. Now we're gonna place our first double stitch. And the way a double stitch works on the purl side, exactly the same as it did in the original video. So I'm going to slip the purl stitch from my left to right knitting needle, and then I'm going to take that working yarn and I'm going to pull it up over to the back, then in between my two knitting needles to the front. So I just turned the one loop of the purl stitch into two loops. Now I want to purl over to the halfway point of my sock. So that can be a little bit tricky to know, but all of the numbers are listed out in the pattern down below for this left sock specifically. So for me, I am knitting the large size, so I'm going to purl 35 stitches over. Now once I purl 35, or up until your center point, I'm going to turn my work. So something you can do now to check that you're in the right place is if you count the number of stitches on either one of your knitting needles, they should have the exact same number. So you should have half over here on the right and half over here on the left. Now what I'm going to do first on this side is I'm going to make a double stitch. So I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front. I'm going to pass the first stitch from my left to right knitting needle, and then I'm going to pull that working yarn up over to the back of my work. So I turn that one knit stitch loop into now two loops. Next, I'm going to knit across, and I'm going to knit all the way up until where my previous double stitch is. So over here on the end, you can see I have my one edge stitch, then I have a double stitch. So I'm going to knit all the way up through this last stitch here before the double stitch. Now that I've reached my double stitch, I'm going to turn my work. And the next row again, we'll start with, oops, dropped it there for a second. We'll start with a double stitch. So I'm going to pass the first stitch from my left to right knitting needle, pull it back over to the back, then take the yarn in between the two knitting needles. And on this side, just like I did on the previous side, I'm going to purl all the way across, all the way up until where my double stitch is on this side. So I work all the way up until it, but don't actually work the double stitch. So this for me ends up being purling 33 stitches. So now this repeat ends up being really similar to what you saw on the right sock or in the original sock video. So what you want to continue doing is on each row, you're going to start off with a double stitch. Then you're either going to purl or knit all the way up until your previous double stitch. Turn your work, then do the exact same thing on the other side, right? So make a double stitch, then either knit or purl all the way up until where your previous double stitches were. So each time we're working in further and further. And you want to continue doing this until you'll finish with a purl side row, and you'll essentially have almost equal number of double stitches on either side. On one side, you'll have one more double stitch than the other. So once you finish the number of rows described in the pattern down below for your size, I'll come back and I'll show you those middle rows where we pick up all those double stitches and add in the 2 stitch markers to work the other side of the heel. Now, once you finish heel side 1 rows that you're supposed to work for your size, you'll have just completed across a purl side row. So when I'm looking at my work right now, again, I'm knitting the size large, I end up with my edge stitch, then I have 12 double stitches, 13 regular stitches across the center here, and then over here on the left, I have 11 double stitches. So now we have to work the center rows. And this is where we're going to work across a lot of the stitches at one time. And basically we're switching from decreasing inwards to now start expanding outwards. So first up, still on heel side 1 part of the pattern, I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to make my last double stitch on heel side 1. So I'm going to make a double stitch on my knit side here. Now I'm going to knit 12 across the center here. And if you're knitting one of the other sizes, you may have to knit 10 instead. And this is where we're going to need our stitch markers again. So let me grab 2 stitch markers. I'm going to place 1 stitch marker, and then I'm going to continue knitting across the rest of the stitches. Each one of these double stitches that I have, I want to work them together. So knitting both pieces of the double stitch together at one time, almost as if you're working a knit 2 together. Knit the final stitch as well. And now I'm going to turn my work again. And on this purl side, I'm going to purl all the way across until the stitch marker. Then I'm going to work those center of the heel stitches. So it's either 10 or 12, depending on the size you're knitting. I'm going to place a stitch marker after I work across the center stitches. And then I'm going to purl all the way across the rest of the sock. So I have the large size, so I just did the 12 across the center. I'm going to place my other stitch marker, and I'm going to keep on going across. Again, on this side, you're going to purl both sides of each double stitch together. At the end of this purl row, we're going to turn our work, and we've now completed heel side 1. So we essentially did the decreases, or the working inwards. Now on heel side 2, we're going to work back over to these stitch markers, and we're going to start expanding outwards to create the second part of the heel. So the first instruction says to knit over to the second stitch marker. So we're going to knit all the way across, essentially the first portion of the sock that isn't part of the heel. Knit all the way past the first stitch marker, just past that one, up through the second stitch marker, and then knit 1 more stitch beyond there. So I'm now up to that second stitch marker. I'm going to pass the stitch marker, and then I'm going to knit 1 more stitch. Turn my work. Now we're going to start adding in the double stitches on heel side 2. So first up, I'm going to start off by making a double stitch. And once you add in the double stitch on either side, you actually don't need the stitch markers anymore, so we can take off the stitch marker. Now the double stitch is essentially your stitch marker. Now I'm going to purl across the center stitches here, past the stitch marker, and then purl 1 more stitch. Now, when I turn my work, the rows are going to differ depending on your size beyond this point. So what we want to do first, no matter what row you're knitting or what letter it starts with, is you're going to start off by making a double stitch. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, pass the first stitch from the left to right knitting needle, and then pull my yarn to the back again. And once you make that double stitch, again, you can take off the stitch marker. So at this point, what we're going to be doing with these repeat rows is we're going to be working outwards. So on the knit side rows, we're going to knit all the way across until wherever your double stitch is, work the double stitch, so work the 2 strands together as if you're knitting them together, then knit 1 more stitch. Then you're going to turn your work, and you're going to make a double stitch, Then you're gonna purl all the way across until wherever your double stitch is on the opposite side. Purl your double stitch, so work both strands together, and then purl one more. So we keep on expanding outwards. So you wanna keep on repeating those repeat rows on either the knit side or the purl side for the number of rows specified in the pattern. And when you finish, you should finish going across a purl side row. So once you finish the last purl side row described in the pattern, link down below, I'll come back and I'll show you the last two finale rows here before we get back into working the foot of the sock. I just finished going across my last purl side row, and now in the instructions it says all sizes, so everyone's last two rows of the heel will look the same. First thing you're going to do is make a double stitch, and then you just want to knit across the rest of the sock, so all the way across the heel, and then also knit that last final stitch that we didn't include as part of the heel. When we turn our work again, now we're just gonna purl one row. So we're purling all the way across all the stitches. We're gonna purl across the heel and the other side of the sock to start over here back at the beginning again, so we can continue working the stockinette pattern for the foot of the sock. So now that I've shown you the modifications that you need for the heel in order to make a right and a left sock, now you can actually rejoin back with the regular pattern or the original pattern for the right foot, and the whole rest of the pattern will be exactly the same. So really all we switched between the right and the left sock was we moved where the heel was. So we moved it from the heel was over here on the right hand side to now we just place the heel over here on the left hand side. So that switches then where the seam is gonna be. Oops, started on the wrong thing. So now you're just gonna keep on working that stockinette up through the foot portion of the stock. And the stockinette is just where you knit one row, then purl one row, then knit one row, then purl one row. And all those details are in the original pattern.